All right, greetings class and welcome to week number 4. That is right, week number 4 of your 9407 class, which is your intellectual freedom and its discontents class. As always, I'm your professor, Dr. J.S.K. Austin, and what we are going to do is a state of the course update, and then I am going to talk a little bit about how you can, should, blah, 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 respond to law enforcement requests, certain law enforcement requests when you are actually working in the library. I know that this is actually off topic from what we're talking about in the modules and everything, but that's what you can expect from Dr. J. So if you haven't had me before, sometimes I talk about the content in the check-in videos that we are going over in the class, but also I think that the content usually can speak for itself. So there are also a lot of times where instead of talking about the content, which we're still talking about First Amendment exemptions, in the class, but instead of talking about that in the check-in video, because again, I think the content that we have in the class is going to speak for itself, instead what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about some things that are covered in the Intellectual Freedom Manual. Again, you all are not required to buy the Intellectual Freedom Manual for my class, so sometimes I share a little bit of information out of that and a little bit of guidance out of that and soapbox off that a little bit. So that's what I'm going to be doing today instead of expounding on the First Amendment exemptions that we're talking about here. So with that said, let's go ahead and first get into that state of the course update. Give me one moment. All right, so the first thing that we need to be aware of is that we've only got 2 more weeks of the First Amendment stuff that we go over. So in week 4, we will carry on with defamation, blackmail, and incitement. And then after that, we are going to go on to next week, we're going to talk about hate speech. But we're going to talk about how hate speech is actually protected and all of that good stuff. And then there's going to be a First Amendment examination that is going to be due a week from this coming Sunday, which will be September the 22nd. Okay, so that's what's on the horizon right now. And I don't think that you have a sync session coming up, but let me double check that. I mean, there's going to be one coming up, but I don't think there's one on the immediate horizon. But let me, again, just double check that. So yeah, we will have Leanne Lord on October the 1st, so that won't be until next month. So we've got a little while before we actually have another sync session. So really what you need to concentrate on right now, again, is going to be that first finishing up the things with the First Amendment information that we're going over, and then you will take that First Amendment examination, which isn't too hard. And again, it's open book, so I'm expecting all of you to do well on that, okay? And after that, yeah, after you take that examination, we're going to switch to more like library dilemmas and that sort of thing. But yeah, you all are well on your way, and I like the way you all are thinking. I've been reading the discussion boards, and yes, good stuff, good stuff. Just keep it up, okay? I'm very pleased with how the class is going thus far. So with that said, let's go ahead and just speak a little bit about some of the because we're done with the course, the state of the course update right there. Actually, it didn't take us long. So let's go ahead, and from there, this will be probably a short video, maybe 20 minutes. And then if you speed up a 20-minute video, it's less than that. But let's talk a little bit about law enforcement and what you should do when law enforcement tries to get information out of you for people who are in the library patrons, and that sort of thing. Give me one moment. All right, so first of all, and this is something that I think is really important for you all to realize, because this is, when it comes to visits from law enforcement, believe me, they can be intimidating. And I know there are a lot of librarians out here, and these people bore me, just to be honest with you. There are a lot of librarians out here who just think that they are these badasses, and they are gonna, I'm not gonna identify the group, but there's even a group of wannabe activist librarians out there that I don't get along with, who will, their slogan is "when we fight, we win." And they call themselves activists, again, even though they work for the state, and there's no such thing as establishment activism. That just sounds stupid in and of itself. But anyway, let me not go too far into that. Let me just say that, again, some of y'all, maybe not some of y'all, let me rephrase this. Some people in our field are just not as badass as they think they are, okay? So a lot of times what happens is librarians will talk the talk about, here's what I would do if if the cops come and the cops demand stuff about, or demand information about my patrons and all that, I'm going to stand there. I'm just going to be quiet. I'm not going to comply. And if they threaten me with arrest, I'll let them arrest me. Do some Googling. One librarian that I know of has actually been arrested in the last 10 years for standing up to law enforcement and not letting law enforcement violate privacy rights of patrons. One single incident of that occurring. And I know that law enforcement has visited more than that one library. So what has ended up happening, therefore, is that these people either, maybe somewhat likely, these people actually did stand their ground and the cops said, okay, there's nothing we can do, and they went away. Or these people punked out, and these librarians punked out, and they gave the cops exactly what they were demanding, and the cops kept it on the hush. That's pretty much how things go. Now, if you're interested in that one situation where a librarian actually did get arrested for standing up for the rights of a patron and not allowing law enforcement to overstep their authority, let me find that real quick. All right, so here's a capture of this incident right here, and I did want to bring this to your attention in part because this is also something that happened in the state of Missouri, so that brings even more reason to bring it up in this class since we are the University of Missouri. So yes, this is the one example that I'm aware of from 2017 of a librarian who was actually arrested for defending the privacy rights of a patron. And my understanding is that the case was eventually dropped. Actually, I don't want to spread false information, so let me make sure that's true. Okay, so yes, again, sorry for the choppiness of this, but I keep going in and out of different little things that I'm trying to refer to in order to bring this information. So yes, the librarian who was charged with obstruction after a day-long trial, all of those, the judge acquitted him of those charges. So yes, the charges were dropped, but this is the one time that I'm aware of within the last 10 years where a librarian actually was a badass and stood up to the cops and was arrested for standing on business. But that usually doesn't happen. These librarians talk a good game, but a lot of times when they're actually face to face with somebody that can hurt them, like a police officer, like a member of the Proud Boys or something like that, they are either backing down or they are letting patrons stand up for them, which is cool. If you got patrons to support you, by all means, don't risk your job if a patron is going to be there to defend you. If a patron is going to be there to defend you, let them defend you and then you can keep your job. But I'm just saying there's a lot of wannabe badassery in this field, and librarians are just not badass people no matter how much they want to try to claim they are. And trust me, I've met some badasses, so I'm not speaking just out of my behind here. I know some people that will make these librarians just even wish that they had not stepped up and called themselves activists, because I know some people who would embarrass them and tell them what Harriet Tubman had to put on the line, what Fred Hampton had to put on the line, what Stokely Carmichael had to put on the line to actually be activists. And librarians are not putting that stuff on the line. They're actually drawing a government paycheck, which is a lot different from Fred Hampton being assassinated by the government, if that makes sense. So when the police actually come to your library demanding things, it's intimidating, but here's what you have to remember. So number one, and if you don't remember anything else from this check-in video, this is the one thing that I need you to remember. This is the one thing that you need to abide by. And again, it's not going to be that easy when a cop is actually in your face looking at you, trying to threaten you with obstruction of justice and those sorts of things. But how you respond in that moment determines if you really are what you say you are, or if you are a pretender. So the main thing that you do need to keep in mind is that libraries should not ever share personally identifiable user information with law enforcement, except if A, patron has given you the permission to share that information with law enforcement, or B, if the cop has a court order, something like a subpoena or a search warrant or something like that. If a cop cannot show you a search warrant, then do not give them any information. If a cop cannot show you a subpoena, do not give them that information. Even if a cop says they're going to call their supervisor as proof, because they do that. They'll say they'll call their supervisor, and that can be vague as heck too. If they say they call their supervisor and they put their supervisor on speaker or whatever, and the supervisor talks to you, does not matter. If that warrant, if that court order is not there, remember that a cop's supervisor is not the judge. A cop supervisor is another ranking officer, and it is the judge who determines whether or not a person's information should be given to law enforcement without that person's consent. It is not the cop, it is not the ranking officer who makes that decision. It is the court, the judge, that makes that decision. So again, if you do not have the permission and they do not show you a subpoena or a search warrant or any court order, do not give them that information. And that is the one thing. If you take nothing else from this video, you do need to take that. Now, I do want you all to understand that most law enforcement officers actually do understand that the library has the right to consult with counsel before responding to requests for user information, all right? So even if they show you the search warrant, even if they show you the subpoena or whatever the case may be, most libraries do have legal counsel, okay? Most library boards have some sort of legal counsel, and then if you're within an academic library, a lot of times you can use the legal counsel of the university if you need to. If you are a public librarian, a lot of times the public library will have its own legal counsel, or it will use the legal counsel of the county commissioners or the city council or whoever is the funding body to that library. And then when it comes to K-12 libraries, I don't really know too much on that realm, but I will also say that when you are getting law enforcement coming in to try to get information on patrons, they're usually going to academic libraries or to public libraries. I'm not aware of any situation where a law enforcement officer actually went to a K-12 library and tried to get confidential information on a student who was under the age of 18 or who was in K-12 school, okay? I'm not come across that, but yes, so if you're in the public library, you should have either the library's legal counsel or the funding body's legal counsel, be it the county commissioners, the city council, whoever. And then again, with the academic library, a lot of times they can use the attorneys that represent the university, okay? So those are things that you need to be aware of as well. You do not have to, even when they show the subpoena, you are well within your rights, or they show that search warrant, you are well within your rights to, first of all, if you are not the supervisor or the administrator, you are well within your rights to say, I'm not comfortable dealing with this. It needs to go higher up. Why don't you speak to my supervisor? Why don't you speak to my administrator? But even if you are the administrator or the supervisor, you're the one who really has to deal with this in real time. The main thing is, yes, you can tell that cop, even when they show you a search warrant, you can tell that cop, I have to consult with a lawyer, okay? And the cop has to allow you to do that, okay? And if a cop denies you the ability to consult with legal counsel and you're not the one who is actually accused of the crime, woo-hoo, you are in for a possible payday. So keep that in mind as well. Now, a lot of librarians do also, so I've talked about this before in the class. I talked about this at the sync session. There are a lot of librarians, again, who see themselves as like social activists and who see themselves as people who are really like game changers and difference makers out there in the real world. And what I want to say to that is there may be, this is going to be very controversial and a lot of you won't like this, but there actually may be situations wherein the library is willingly cooperating with law enforcement. Now, if you are willingly cooperating with law enforcement by identifying these relevant records or searching or bringing up computer search history or something like that, even in those situations, it is not advisable. I repeat, it is not advisable even when you are cooperating with law enforcement. It is not advisable to actually just right away give them the patron records. What you should do is preserve the patron records that they are requesting and then talk to your legal counsel to see if you're in the clear, okay? And there are going to be times when that does happen. There are certainly times, now usually we don't like to give like search history just of random people who aren't causing trouble within the library space. But if you know that somebody is using library resources to conduct illegal activities, that becomes something of a different nature. That becomes something that you might want to actually involve law enforcement in, because we technically a lot of times do not want illegal activities happening in the libraries. And I know some of you are saying, well, Dr. Jace, we never want illegal activities happening in the libraries. Actually, that's also not the case either. I can't name any institutions because then I can get in trouble and so can they. But there are some libraries that actually are doing illegal activities. Mostly when you see libraries that are actually doing illegal activities, they're doing it for people who are like undocumented migrants, basically. So I know of some. Again, I can't name any libraries, and hopefully nobody's going to try to rat me out to law enforcement. But I am aware of some libraries that are actually doing some illegal stuff in order to help undocumented migrant people, and that is what it is. Okay, but for the most part, you're not wanting illegal activity to happen in the library. And so when illegal activity is happening in the library, then it is time to go ahead at that point and cooperate with law enforcement. But you want to do that strategically. Again, what you probably want to do is go ahead and just preserve the computer records or the patron records that you're talking about, preserve them somehow, some way, and offer them to law enforcement, again, after talking to legal counsel, okay? So that's how that works, and that's how you should approach that. But I will also say, just as an aside, that it is also fairly bad practice, and most libraries don't do it, as far as even keeping a record of computer searches and keeping a record of patron checkouts and that sort of thing. Most libraries don't do it because they don't want that information to be there if there is a subpoena. So basically this is how it works. If you don't save that patron data. So for instance, if you don't save the information of what a patron has been checking out over the years, and you don't save the information on what a patron has been looking at on the public computers or the terminals or that sort of thing, as long as you're not saving that information, then when a warrant does come, you can still say, hey, we don't keep that information. And there's nothing that the cops can do. They can't force you to give them information that you don't have, okay? So for me, a best practice is actually not to keep that information anyway, and most libraries don't. Most libraries, as soon as you check a book back in, yes, there is a record that you check the book out while it's in your possession, but once you check that book back in, usually they use the circulation software to just erase. Once we get the book back, there's no record that you ever checked it out. Okay. And that, again, is what I think is best practice. You don't want to keep a paper trail of what your patrons are doing because you want to respect patron privacy. And the only way to respect patron privacy is to get rid of the record of patron activity. Okay. Maybe that's not the only way, but that is the best way. And then finally, the last thing that I want to just kind of soapbox or dish out on right now is that, so the last thing that I want to bring up here is that the law actually in all 50 states and in Washington, D.C., the law does actually give libraries some sort of protection of confidentiality of library records. So what I mean by that is, like, in all 50 states and the District of Columbia, there are laws that are going to be on your side. So when a cop tries to say, no, you have to give me this information, there are laws in all 50 states and in Washington, D.C. that say, hey, these people are entitled to protection. These people are entitled to confidentiality as far as what they're looking at in the library, okay? And then also, I do want to just make sure that everybody is clear on a few things. First of all, cops do not have a duty to protect us, okay? They have no duty to protect us. You hear this protect and serve thing that a lot of cops have, and they say they'll have it on police cars and everything like that. The truth of the matter is the court case of Warren versus Washington, D.C. made it clear that the cops have absolutely no obligation to protect the citizenry. Okay, the job of the cops is to enforce the law. They do not have to protect you. Okay, what they have to do is enforce the law. So yes, if you break a law, they have to enforce it and arrest you. But if a cop sees you drowning, the cop can just let you drown. They're not obligated to protect and serve you at all. They can let you die if they see you dying. They can let you drown if they see you drowning. They can let you bleed out in a car accident if they see it. Okay. So that's something that I want you all to get out of your heads right now. If you're somebody who thinks that the cops are here to protect and serve you, the federal courts have actually said, no, they're not. And the other thing is that the cops actually, per the federal courts, also do not have to tell you the truth. Cops are protected in lying, okay? It's called, I forget the term for it. Let me look that up too. Okay, well, I can't quite find the term, but there is a term. There is a term for the type of deceptive interrogation that law enforcement is legally allowed to do. But yes, the cops are legally allowed to lie to you. So because of that, one thing, in order to get a confession or in order to get information, yes, the cops are allowed to lie to you, and they do it all the time. I've been lied to by cops have lied to me. Cops have probably lied to you. They lie to everybody because their job is not to be truthful. Again, their job is just to protect, to enforce the law. And they can enforce the law any way they see fit, so long as they're not breaking their own laws. But lying is not breaking the cops' laws, okay? So the reason why I bring that up is because a lot of I shouldn't say a lot of cops, but one thing that cops will try to do to trick you is they might say, yes, I don't have a warrant. I'm sorry. I don't have the subpoena. I'm sorry. But this time is of the essence. If you don't give me this information right now, something really bad is going to happen. There will be a lot of blood on your hands. If you don't give me this patron record right now, that patron's going to go kill a bunch of people, and it'll be all your fault because you didn't give me that information. Again, cop is probably lying, and what you need to do in that situation is just remind the cop that, hey, it is neither a burden nor unusual for a cop to just be able to come back same day, after talking to a judge or a magistrate. They can come back same day with the proper court materials, and they can put a stop to whatever they're claiming they're trying to put a stop to. They have to come back with that documentation. Don't let them lie to you. Make them come to you with the papers, okay? If you let them lie to you, they're going to, all right? Cops do not care about telling the truth. Cops care about closing cases. That's what they care about. Now, sometimes those things overlap. Sometimes closing a case and telling the truth, they come together and they work just fine together. And when that happens, great. But that's not always the case. A lot of times these cops are actually out here just lying, and because we've cultivated this culture of people thinking that cops are there to protect and serve, and because we've cultivated this culture of people thinking that cops are trustworthy people, when they lie, it catches a lot of people off guard because they weren't expecting the cop to lie to them. But cops are dishonest, and policing is an inherently dishonest profession. How they get confessions out of people a lot of times is by lying to them, okay? So what you need to do is just make sure that you know that there's a good chance that the cop is lying to you as well. And don't let them guilt you into thinking that if you don't act the way they want you to act, that a bunch of blood is going to be on your hands and this, that, and the other, okay? A lot of times if they've gotten to the point where they need library patron records to bolster a case, that means that they've already been putting the work in, okay? So they've got other evidence that they need, and they don't even a lot of times necessarily need yours. They're just using it to bolster the case that they're making. Now, before I let you all go, I do want to say that if you do not have access to an attorney, you can call the American Library Association Office of Intellectual Freedom. Their number is 1-800-545-2433, extension 4226, and you can tell them about what's going on, and they will help you with some legal counsel. What you would do in that situation after you call them is you would request a referral to legal counsel, and they will help you out. A lot of people are very critical of ALA, but ALA really isn't as bad as people say it is. I mean, it's not awesome, but I don't know. I think ALA has its good and its bad, and I think that that's actually the case of most, if not all, library organizations. But anyway, so I wanted to share that information with you all. Again, it is easy to sit here and say, this is what you do when the cops are trying to hound you, but it's a whole other thing when you got that cop actually in your face, and you know that that cop has a gun and a bulletproof vest, and you know that you're not allowed to carry a gun into the library to defend yourself. So you're confronted by somebody with a gun, somebody who's lying to you, somebody who's trying to get information out of you without going through the proper channels. It is very, very intimidating. So, I mean, again, if you're a bit intimidated by the sound of all this, then one thing you might want to do is, get a little bit more training enforcement under your belt before you actually rise up to a supervisory or administrative or management level, okay? I'm going to leave it right there. I actually took way more than I thought I was going to, and that does happen sometimes, but hopefully you sped this up, and I'm going to leave it right there. I am Dr. Jace, and if you are confronted by a cop, call the lawyer just in case. I will see you all next week. Thank you.